Today I'm down in Southern California taking a look at the new 2023 Honda CR-V. This is very important for Honda because it is the best-selling Honda in America. And for 2023, it's all new with a second generation of Honda's excellent dual-motor hybrid system. In this video, however, we're talking about the 1.5-liter turbo. If you want to know more about the hybrid, that's going to be in a separate video. As we see with the recently redesigned Honda HR-V, this CR-V is bigger in every dimension versus the outgoing model and definitely squarer as well, giving this a more muscular and perhaps more masculine appearance up front. We have a large chrome bar that runs right across the front, full LED headlights in every trim, big bold grate there, lots of egg crate going on. Fog lights down below are not available, which is an interesting twist. The boxier and more upright theme continues as we move around to the side. You can also tell this has a longer hood profile than we've had before. For this generation CR-V, they've added a lot of length. This is now 184.8 inches long, making this on the long side of the compact crossover segment. This is about 3 inches longer than the Toyota RAV4, and almost as long as the Outlander and Tiguan. Most of that stretch goes right back here to the rear passenger compartment, where we find significantly more legroom than we find in the Toyota. Ground clearance remains the same as before, 7.8 to 8.2 inches depending on the model, but back here we get less of a minivan-like profile, although we still have a very upright hatch in the back. As often happens with Honda models, we have slightly wider tires than we find in the competition. All versions of the CR-V come standard with 235 width tires. You'll find 18-inch wheels standard, 19-inch wheels optional in the CR-V lineup. Most of the competition has only 225 width tires, so the CR-V is a little bit more focused on driving dynamics than something like a RAV4 hybrid. Moving around to the back, we find a more expressive style than we've found in CR-Vs of the past. We still have a very vertical taillight arrangement here, definitely distinctive look pulled from the past. And then we have little chevrons sort of right there inside on the tailgate itself. Interesting twist, these are not full LED taillight modules. The turn signals are still incandescent. For this generation CR-V, Honda's doing something unusual under the hood. The engine lineup has sort of a tick-tock cadence. There are 4 different trims, 2 different engines, and then it kind of flip-flops back and forth. The base engine has a standard 1.5-liter turbo. The next trim level up gets the 2-liter hybrid. The next trim level up from that goes back to the 1.5-liter turbo, and then the top-end trim gets the hybrid system again. Today we're talking about the 1.5-liter turbo model. This is basically the same as last year. It produces 190 horsepower, 179 pound-feet of torque. As before, it's mated to a standard continuously variable transmission, and you'll get between 29 and 30 miles per gallon, depending on the options you select. If you want better fuel economy and better performance, that's going to be the hybrid model. That will give you up to 204 horsepower and up to 40 miles per gallon. As with every Honda sold in North America, there's a ton of standard active safety tech on the new CR-V. We have autonomous emergency braking, lane keeping, adaptive cruise control, auto high beams, and driver attention monitoring on every trim. New for 2023, we also have traffic jam assistant and the traffic sign recognition software, standard on every model. Optional on every trim is blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic detection, something that surprised me a bit, and you can also get front and rear parking sensors if you want. Jumping into the front seat, I found these seats quite comfortable. Honda says they've revised the front seat design to improve bolstering and support for the driver and front passenger. This model has a 2-way adjustable lumbar support, 2-position memory over there on the driver's door, and we have a manual tilt telescopic steering column with about the same range of motion as previous. The passenger seat, as with the previous generation CR-V, is powered in this trim, but it doesn't have the same range of motion as the driver's seat. Moving to the back seat, we again find plenty of room back here, a little bit more legroom than we had before at 82.3. This is now among the roomiest in the compact crossover segment. But oddly enough, headroom does drop down a little bit versus the outgoing model. I didn't find that to be a problem, however, sitting very comfortably in this back seat. Honda says that the rear seats now have 8 different recline positions, including a very reclined position, and I found plenty of headroom in all of them. The rear seat is a 60-40 split design, so this center section is reclining at the same point as that. Scooting all the way over to the 40% side, still lots of room with the front seat comfortably adjusted for a taller person. And over here, as you can see, I have about 1.5 inches of headroom left again. Honda says that they really focused on child seat integration for this generation with some new retaining clips for the latch anchors at the bottom, and there's certainly going to be enough room for rear-facing seats here. On the downside, Honda continues to anchor the shoulder belt for the center seat position right back here in the ceiling of the cargo area. Not only does that impact the cargo capacity of the vehicle, it also means that the shoulder belt is practically right in this person's face. even if I were to buckle this shoulder belt into position and then sit there as a normal person would, that seatbelt is going to be really annoying for whoever is in the outboard seating position. And if you anchor a child seat into the center seat position, which is the safest place for a child seat, it can be skewed slightly to one side because of that shoulder belt position. Behind the optional power hatch, we find 39.3 cubic feet of cargo capacity, making this one of the roomiest cargo areas in the segment. And if you fold down the second row, you'll get up to 76.5 cubic feet of storage capacity. Now, the cargo area does change depending on whether you get the hybrid or the non-hybrid, because the hybrid battery pack goes right here under the load floor. In the non-hybrid, if I lift up the load floor, we find a spare tire, and we also have a two-stage load floor, so I can toss that into a lower position. We don't find that in the hybrid model. As we look around this interior, keep in mind this is an EXL trim, so we have a pretty standard sized moonroof over the front row. Honda has given this model extra noise cancellation microphones. They want you to know that this is one of the quietest cabins the CR-V has ever had. We have height adjustable shoulder belts for the driver and front passenger, and two-way adjustable headrests. The leather upholstery features perforations in the center sections. Although these seats are not ventilated, they are just heated in this trim. Moving over to the front doors and the dashboard, we find a style that is very similar to the Honda Civic, but few components, if any, are directly shared with the Civic. The major styling component that is shared between the two models, however, is this sort of cheese grater section running right across the dash. I really like the look, but I wonder how easy this is going to be to clean over time, because dust will certainly collect on the inside of that cheese grater section, and it's going to be pretty difficult to remove, especially if you live out in the country. Down here, we have a pretty typically sized bin-style glove compartment. I was barely able to fit a large tablet computer inside. Lots of soft touch materials are going on the upper section of the doors and the dash, but as you'd expect, lots of hard plastics going on the bottom of the dash. In the center of the dashboard, we find two different infotainment systems. This is the larger 9-inch touchscreen infotainment system. It supports wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. We then have a home button over here to take you back to the native interface, back button, physical track forward, backward, and a volume knob. Very easy to use. Below that, we have the 2-zone automatic climate control and engine start-stop button, USB input for the system if you want to use that, and a Qi wireless charging mat. There's also a 12-volt power port. If I move the cable out of the way, we find the drive mode selector right down here, auto start-stop enable disable, hill descent control, the auto brake hold button, and then a console shifter. Two big cup holders between the two front seats right there, padded center armrest, that's also leather wrapped. Under all of that, we find a pretty deep storage area where you could easily accommodate a gallon of milk. On the driver's side, we find a partial LCD instrument cluster, which did surprise me since a lot of the competition offers a full LCD cluster. What you see over here on the left side is the LCD, also the middle portion, but the speedometer over on the right, that's an analog gauge. Moving out from there, we find essentially the same steering wheel that we find in a number of other Honda products. No paddle shifters on the back of this model, although you will find them on the back of the Sport models. On the left side of the steering wheel, we find some infotainment controls along with a button and dial that control that multifunction LCD. Then on the right side, we find the controls for the standard adaptive cruise control system. The first thing we need to do out on the road is floor the CR-V. This has a pretty typical CVT start. The starting ratio of this is not as aggressive as some of the 8-speed automatics that we find in the competition, but after that it imitates a stepped automatic pretty well. If you're driving this gently, it's just going to vary ratios as needed, but unlike some Nissan CVTs, this changes ratios much faster. So if I'm driving this more gently, say on this country road right here, and then I floor it, it's going to have what feels like a traditional automatic transmission shift. Even though we have a turbocharged engine standard under the hood, 0 to 60 times are likely going to be a little bit slower than some of the competition. I'm going to go ahead and put the 0 to 60 time from the last generation CR-V at the top of your screen. This is likely going to be very similar because we have the same amount of power, same CVT, and the weight has increased only a little bit thanks to the extra stretch in the back. The biggest thing to know about the CR-V is that this is really well balanced, and that's not what I would say about all the competition. Generally speaking, there are going to be trade-offs when you focus on handling or you focus on ride quality, etc. And Honda has managed to really focus on all of those attributes, but they don't necessarily excel in every one. So this is not going to be the best handling option, it's not going to be the quickest option, but it does everything really, really well. Designing a well-balanced crossover like this is, generally speaking, harder than a singular-focused crossover. If you want the fastest vehicle in the segment, put a more powerful engine under the hood, but that's not necessarily also going to improve driving dynamics or braking scores, etc. It's simply going to make you go faster 0 to 60. And with the CR-V, Honda was really focused on balancing every aspect of this vehicle's performance. Cabin quietness, the braking scores, the handling ability, the ride quality, etc. It's really obvious that this is a dynamic vehicle in this segment as far as the handling ability goes, has a nice stable feel around corners like that, but you will find vehicles that will grip the road a bit better. You'll also find vehicles that are perhaps a little bit softer if that's what you're after, but everything together, this does a really, really good job. The one area where I think Honda could improve a bit is cabin quietness. That's something that we've noticed in other Honda vehicles for a while. This is improved over the previous generation CR-V, but it's not as quiet as some of the competition. Specifically with road noise, it seems like we do get a little bit more rumble coming into the cabin. Now, fuel economy is a bit tricky to talk about because I haven't been driving this at home, but Honda says that the 1.5 liter turbo should get you 29 to 30 miles per gallon average. That seems totally believable. In my real world driving at home with the previous generation model that had the same drivetrain, I was averaging right around 28, 29 miles per gallon. The 1.5 liter turbo is definitely very, very fuel efficient, especially if you drive it gently. And for most folks out there, the CVT is going to be an excellent companion. It's not going to be as dynamic as a stepped automatic like you might find in a Mazda CX-5, something along those lines. If you want something that's a bit peppier, obviously that's where the Acura RDX comes in. It's not going to be that much more expensive than the top-end flavors of this, but it is going to give you a real 10-speed automatic transmission, a more powerful 2-liter turbo, and an optional torque vectoring axle in the back. If you're looking to get your hands on the new CR-V, you're in luck because these are already on sale in America. The price tag is more expensive than the last generation model because the base trim no longer exists. This CR-V now starts in EX trim with the 1.5 liter turbo for $31,110. If you want all-wheel drive, that's an extra $1,500. Now again, there's sort of a hybrid sandwich going on in this lineup. Things start with the turbo, the next trim level up is the sport trim, then we go back to the turbo for $33,760 in the EXL trim. This is going to give you the leather interior, driver's memory seat, the 9-inch infotainment system, the power tailgate, and front and rear parking sensors. If you want all-wheel drive on this one, that's again another $1,500. If you want all the bells and whistles on your next CR-V, you want the top-end touring model, which starts just over $38,000. But interestingly, this doesn't have as many bells and whistles available as we find in some of the competition. Features like a heads-up display, ventilated seats, or 360-degree camera are not going to be found on the CR-V for any price, but you will find it on a number of the competition. However, most of those models with those features are going to cost more, and the CR-V is really focusing on a strong value proposition, which is exactly what we find in every trim level. Likely the reason for that is if you wanted some of those extra features, Acura has an RDX for sale. And of course, Acura is Honda's luxury brand. We don't find a Kia luxury brand, for instance, and that's probably why we find all of those bells and whistles available on some Kia models and some Hyundai models, but not over here on the Honda CR-V. As we so often see from Honda, the CR-V is really focused on a strong value proposition in the middle of the segment. If you want the least expensive crossover, you're going to find that somewhere else. If you want the most luxurious crossover in this segment, you'll also find that somewhere else. But if you want a strong value with good fuel economy, a decent drivetrain, and a very roomy interior, you will find that in every CR-V available. As always, hit that subscribe button at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of my latest videos, including a full review of the CR-V just as soon as I can get one of these at home. In the meantime, find me at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those other social places, and of course, check out the hybrid video as well. I'll see all of you later. And then if you want all of the tech on your next CR-V, you go back to the hybrid model for definitely more money. And money that I have totally forgotten because I did not write that down.